Before we start this podcast, I want to definitely remind you of a sponsor for Fresh of the Word, 20 by 20 Apparel. Founded in 2015, 20 by 20 Apparel brings original tributes to pro wrestling's classic arenas, moments, and events. They look to spotlight the bloopers, bleeps, and body slams along with the biggest, smallest, strangest, and strongest. In the world of wrestling where there's hundreds of shirts, promotions, flyers, social media accounts, and ads, don't get lost in the sea of parody shirts and display fonts. They can provide professional graphic design services at a reasonable price. 20 by 20 also hand screen prints all the tees in-house. So if you'd like to discuss a possible run of tees, posters, koozies, foam fingers, or even Zubaz, then drop them a line at 20by20apparel.com. That's the number 20x, the number 20apparel.com. And also check out their enamel pin line. It's super cool.
Fresh is the word.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Fresh is the Word podcast. I'm your host, Kelly K. Fresh Frazier, and like always, we have the freshest of guests for you. The guest for this episode is trumpet player, cartoonist, composer, and educator Dave Chisholm, whose latest work is Chasin the Bird, Charlie Parker in California, a 144-page graphic novel via Z2 Comics, commissioned by the Parker Estate in celebration of Bird's centennial, showcasing a stretch of time the infamous jazz saxophonist Charlie Parker spent time in California. During our conversation, we talked about how this book took shape and what sort of research went into developing this graphic novel. We also talked about Chisholm's musical background and how he was able to combine that with comics, along with so much more. And before we get into this episode, just want to speak on a few things. Right now, I'm in development stages of really doing some things to show off my record collection, my music nerdery with my record collection. More significantly with my Detroit stuff, a lot of obscure stuff. I'm gonna be doing something on Twitch, and then I'm gonna be doing more stuff on TikTok also, just to show off my general record collection. So you can actually follow me on both at KFresh Detroit on both Twitch and TikTok. And I'm going to have some cool stuff coming up. It's going to just be basically about record stuff. And I've been wanting to do something like that for a while, but a few of my friends gave me some ideas about how to attack it. And I'm excited to do that. So that might be starting in the next couple of weeks. I'm just trying to get all the technical stuff, locked down. Other than that, just heard that Larry Flint from, the creator of Hustler magazine passed away. And that's another thing where it's just he fought for the First Amendment rights, for nudity and stuff like that. And he was really a big ally in that, and I have a friend, she's a comedian, Teresa Lowe. She's been writing for Hustler for past 6 years, and she says working there has been amazing. They've been so supportive, more so supportive than other publications who act like they're progressive and whatnot. So definitely celebrate his accomplishments. There's still a long ways to go before pornography and sex work and sex education really gets accepted, and we need to break those walls down, because all the reasons why people don't want to accept any of that stuff is bullshit. And they literally place the worst case scenario of anything into it. It's so we need to step up. People need to step up about just sex in general. If it comes to pornography, sex education, sex workers, just information about sexuality and people's bodies and everything. There's a lot of just science out there that makes a strong argument for a lot of the stuff that people are wanting to teach out there when it comes to the topic of sex. So rest in peace, Larry Flint, your true pioneer. Now, other than that, that's about it. That's all I really want to talk about right now. So after a short break from our sponsors, let's get into this interview with Dave Chisholm and talk about Chasing the Bird. Welcome back to the Fresh is the Word podcast, and like always, we have the freshest of guests for you. And my guest for today is Dave Chisholm. He is a musician, he is a cartoonist, and currently he has a new graphic novel out called Chasing the Bird. It is stories about Charlie Parker, the jazz legend, during this time in California. Thanks for joining the show, Dave.
Hey, thanks for having me, Kelly.
Yo, it's like when I first got an advance for this book, I was like, oh, dude, this is cool. I like when graphic novels and music kind of come together, and because I'm a music guy, and I was like, oh, okay, this looks cool. And then I saw also that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was going to be doing did the forward for it, and I'm like, yo, like. Kareem is to me, when it comes to the basketball players, the greatest of all time. And he's just and not only was he a great person, but he was our great basketball player. He was a great person also, and still is like that, So first off, let's get into just why did you want to do this book? Because I know you're a musician itself, so you have a musical background. So why did you want to do this graphic novel?
Well, that's an interesting question because the way I got this, I was actually approached by Z2, the publisher. They had put out a book of mine called Instrumental in 2017. That's a book that has a soundtrack of music. It's about musicians and has music that goes with it.
Yeah.
And so I had already had a rapport with them, and they were approached by the Charlie Parker estate to put out this graphic novel in celebration of Charlie Parker's centennial, which is I think in a couple days, his 100th birthday.
Yeah.
And so when they were approached by those people, they said, "Oh, we know just the right guy to do this book." And so then they contacted me, and as soon as they told me about this possibility, my brain caught fire, and it was immediately yes, I need to do this. I have to do this. And and then it kind of came through the pipeline that they wanted it to be about his time in California, which was perfect because it kind of narrowing the scope of the storytelling. It makes it a lot easier to tell an entertaining story rather than trying to tell someone's entire life story, which is a much bigger challenge.
Yeah, of course. And someone like that, it's how can you put a whole person's life story into one graphic novel?
Yeah, and there's that mistake that, well, I don't want to throw anything under the bus, but I think that the problem that tends to arise with that is nothing is done. You don't dive into anything really deeply.
Yeah.
Try to tell too broad of a story. So it was really nice. The events in the book all take place within a 4-year span in real life. In real life that they were within 4 years, and in the comic it's 2 years. So already there's a little bit of messing with the chronology to make it a more compact story. So yeah. And so yeah, they approached me about it, and like I said, my brain caught fire, and so I pitched this idea of the framing of the story to them, and eventually they approved of my pitch, and it was off to the races, man. That was in the fall. That was in September, and so I was off to the races. I had to just really turn on the gas and not let up until I was done with the book. So So yeah.
How did you get the stories for this book? Because there's like 4 or 5 different stories being told from different point of views. Where did you get the stories from?
Okay, yeah. Well, the you know, in the couple weeks that I had between kind of learning about this project and then pitching it to the people, I just kind of went into like a rabbit hole of like books and research and stuff. So I read maybe like 4 biographies of Charlie Parker, and then I looked up like every newspaper article that I could find that was archived, and interviews with him that were archived, and I kind of like was deliberately looking for people whose lives intersected with Charlie's during this period of time, because that was my whole angle, was kind of like to tell the story, to show this person from a variety of points of view, ranging from fellow musicians and good friends to musicians who look up to him, to artists and lovers and managers and non-musicians and stuff like that, so that we could get Charlie's points of view on this figure from all over the place. And so I was on the hunt for people whose lives intersected with Charlie's, and so yeah, like I came across these stories from a variety of sources. Some of the sources are very slim, and I had to kind of like what historical fiction writers do, and you kind of take like one sentence source and say like, how can I, what would this interaction have really been like?
Yeah.
What would this relationship have really been like? What would this chance encounter have really been? What would have happened? What would they have talked about? What was Charlie interested in? What was this other person interested in? What do I know? Are there any historical quotes that I can pull from that will inform this story from any of the people? And then it kind of became, looking for as many authentic ways to fill in that story, and then using my own creativity and, I don't know, empathy, I guess, to create the stuff to recreate the stuff that I didn't have sourced, that I couldn't have sourced, So yeah, man, it was an awesome process, man. It was really fun and crazy.
Was there any other stories that, didn't really flush out, that you didn't make the book, that you just kind of had on the list? And how did you choose the ones that you ended up going with?
Yeah, there's a few stories that I regrettably had to kind of like thin out. I really wanted to do a chapter that was from the point of view of Charlie's like wife Doris, who appears in the 6th chapter of the book briefly. But if I made a chapter from her point of view, it would have kind of defeated the it would have kind of like, I feel like it would have let the air out of the balloon, in a sense of like, there's this kind of overarching mystery that's like where Charlie goes missing at a certain point, and every story ends with him like, wow, where was he during this time? And if I would have had her have a chapter, then that mystery would have been answered before it would have been like, before it was ready to be answered. And then there's a guy named Dean Benedetti, who is really famous in Charlie Parker circles as a guy who was a saxophone player who basically like dedicated his life to following Charlie around and recording every gig that Charlie played. So basically, like, Charlie Parker is maybe, in terms of percentage of performances recorded, the most recorded musician of like all time in terms of percentage, right?
Yeah.
This dude Dean, especially from that era, this dude Dean would like show up with like a reel-to-reel tape recorder and set up in the bathroom and wire a microphone out, and then only record when Charlie was playing, which is wild, right? There's all the great musicians that are playing too, but he was like, I only care about the saxophone playing. And I thought a chapter from his point of view would have been cool, but it kind of became like I knew that this crazy encounter happened between a young John Coltrane and Charlie in California, and that was like too much of like this incredible moment to like let go of, and I didn't want to have more than one chapter from the point of view of a saxophone player who admires Charlie Parker.
Yeah.
And so there was a certain amount of chess that went into like putting it together, and there were definitely some situations where I found an anecdote about Charlie that happened in New York, and it just fit perfectly. So I moved it to LA and added it to like the Dizzy Gillespie story, for example. Or there's some stuff that Dizzy Gillespie says to Charlie at the dramatic climax of that chapter that was allegedly said by someone else at a later date to Charlie. But again, I took those words and was like, this is like poetry in the sense that like it takes this big idea and boils it down. And I don't want to introduce a new character on like page 20 of this 22-page chapter. So I'll take those words and put it in Dizzy's mouth instead of this other person's mouth. And it became sort of like that chess game or trying to be strategic to keep it concise and interesting and thematically on point. And again, like I'm really happy with the results. I couldn't be happier with the way this book turned out.
When you're dealing with all this material that you've researched, kind of placing it all together, and when it comes to that point of like filling in the blanks, like you say, taking this quote and kind of figuring out what to do with it, how do you sort of keep it authentic and not sort of bringing in your own sort of biases into it?
So that is a great question, and I think that there's no way to actually avoid your own biases. So like I would say that like you just have to like, yeah, I mean that's it really. The answer is I kept it up as authentic as I could, and at the same time recognize that like my biases are there, and I'm trying to like, there's certain beats that I needed to hit, there's certain themes that I needed to hit, and I was like looking at it and I'm like, okay, well, I need to talk about this subject and which chapter is the best fit for this subject, and I plopped it in there, and I want to talk about this other subject, and I was like, well, this obviously fits in this chapter. And it was also more like thinking about like, if I was to read this book about Charlie Parker, what topics would I be annoyed with if it didn't come up? What topics would I be upset like if it didn't come up? Like if I was reading a book about jazz musicians in that era, and I just and the author just avoided talking about race, I would be like, yo, that's not cool, because it's so integral to this music. This is music that comes from Black America during a time, when there was a lot of strife. I mean, there still is now. So let's be real. But like, and this is music is a direct reflection of that. And so I had to talk about that. I had to put that in there somewhere, even if the people back then, the artists back then, weren't really talking about that on the public record. It was something that went around between them behind closed doors and stuff like that. And trying to find a way to place that in gracefully that actually also, well, okay. And then, or something like Charlie oftentimes, like, to explore his background where he really loved like European classical music. And then that's something that he was very comfortable talking about in interviews. And so like, what might a young John Coltrane say to him, given the opportunity to have a one-on-one conversation with him, and when he maybe speaks to that, and sort of like, at a certain point, I knew there were things that I couldn't leave out, and so I was looking for spots to put those in, or ways to like kind of talk about like what makes Charlie's music special. This is me speaking to really, as an educator, talking to people who trying to communicate what makes this music special to non-musicians, like comics readers, right?
Yeah.
So like in the Dizzy chapter, right away, I just get into it, you know, because I want people to be invested in it that way and to have an understanding, like, why is this person important? It's not because he was a drug addict. It's not because he was a larger than life personality. It's because of his music and what his music stood for in his culture at the time, right? And what the music stood for in the greater fabric of American culture at the time. And so, you know, Dizzy was someone who could talk about that stuff in a way that really bridged the gap. And I think that so again, it's a funny thing because that word authenticity, it's a hard one because
Yeah.
I think historians, we always want to like act like, I say we, like I am one, but really this is like me taking my first step in that world, right? But we always want to say like, well, we're presenting an authentic picture, but there's no way you can avoid your own biases, and there's no way also you can, especially for a book like this where I really have a theme and I have an agenda.
Right.
Like, it's not from day one when the estate approached me, they were like, we don't want a documentary. We don't want a dry, boring documentary. They wanted entertaining stories about Charlie Parker during this time.
Right.
And so that's from them. And then on my side, I'm like, it can't just be entertainment. There has to be some underlying theme, underlying structure that ties it all together. And so this was my challenge of taking those and mashing them together. And at a certain point, like, yeah, I guess that's a pretty convoluted answer to that one question, but hopefully that gets to the heart of it somewhat.
When you're dealing with this issue of race in these stories, you know, we're currently in this, you know, new chapter of a civil rights movement, and a main theme of that is, you know, do the work. You know, don't always depend on like your, you know, as white people, don't depend on your black friends to always teach you. You know, do the work. Like, when you were going into these stories about Charlie Parker, you know, how did you make sure that you were like doing the work and make sure that like you were at the best, like making sure that the stories about race and that issue come off as best as possible?
Man, that's a really good question, and I knew right away that I was gonna, you know, like, very early in the process, I approached some friends slash musician acquaintances of mine who are like Black American people, right? And I asked them if they would be sensitivity readers for this project. And so I made sure, and I had like big long conversations and took major notes and really kind of like learned a lot from that. So like,
Yeah, you did the work.
I did the work. Yeah. Well, I mean, okay, like I think and I think that was part of it. A huge part of it was that, and then knowing that I'm telling us that this story. Okay, there's a few angles on this, man. So bear with me here.
Go ahead.
If any of this stuff you want to edit out because it just gets too in the weeds.
No,
that's
just go. Just go.
I'm talking to you, man. So like, I feel like if I was trying to write a fictional story about a saxophone player in the 1950s who's Black in America, I would really. If I was trying to build something like that from nothing, I would really have to stop and say, I probably shouldn't do this.
Right.
This isn't but the fact that I'm telling a story that's like, at the very least, framed around events that actually happened, that like, the amount of like the amount of like, filling in the gaps that I would have to do was small enough, and and telling the story in the way that I told it from this like rotating points of view allowed me to try to approach this topic from as many different angles as I could. On top of that, I knew that I knew that the project wasn't gonna be necessarily about race. Like this isn't like a meditation on race.
Right.
It's a story where obviously you could posit that a lot of Charlie's inability to cope with like real life and his need for escape stems from the fact that like he was a black person living in America during this time, right?
Yeah.
But that said, like there's more to it than that, and the story is like never I'm never like trying to tell it from Charlie's point of view, so we're not really getting like we're not trying to get inside his head. That's the whole point of the book too, is that like you can't really know a person
right
all the way, like and everyone's point of view on a person is going to be different. In particular, someone who is really admired, and someone who before his death even, he was like a legendary kind of like mythical figure in the jazz world, for better or worse. You know, some of his influence on the subsequent generations of jazz musicians was not great. And then the second part of it is that like, well, that, I mean, I guess that's it. I mean, I suppose that's it. Like that's the answer, I suppose. I mean, it's a tricky subject, man, and it's definitely something that I did my best to do as much homework as I could do, and make it as good as I can make it without being exploitative in any way, you know?
right
Like it's about elevating this figure and making people aware of this figure who is an important, like, historic Black American figure. So, and there's not a single part of me that's like trying to take credit for Charlie Parker's. That would be insane, right? Anyway, I don't know. I hope I'm not coming across as like defensive or anything like that.
No, it is a tricky subject, but you know, certain times, like, okay, for me personally, I kind of came up in the Detroit hip hop scene here. I've always, you know, even before that, I was very much into hip hop and sports, and and a lot of those figures were Black figures. I grew up right off of like the, people know as 8 Mile because of the movie. I grew up right off of 8 Mile, so I know about the this invisible but very thick like border on 8 Mile that separated the white and the Black neighborhoods. So there's always these questions in my life about like Black culture. So
Yeah.
when you have that sort of upbringing, and to a certain extent you're always not, always aware of it, and you're able to, like me, I was able to respect it and gain a lot of acclaim and respect from people within the city, within these communities or whatnot. Like, you always sort of think about these things though, in even you're always learning, you're always doing the work, so you always sort of think about like, okay,
Yeah.
how am I gonna treat this with respect?
Yeah. I mean, I think that our upbringings are different, but I think what makes them, I think like.
Let's talk about your upbringing some,
Like the earliest music I remember hearing is like Miles Davis, Sketches of Spain, Charles Mingus, Let My Children Hear Music, and Charles Mingus Moves. So my dad is a huge jazz head, and all of my favorite musicians growing up were like, well, it's a funny thing, because like yeah, I mean, I was born in 1981, so like,
Me too. We're same age.
like, yeah, like, Michael Jackson was like a hero for everybody when we were growing up.
Oh yeah.
Like Thriller was like everything to me when I was like 5 and 6 and 7 years old, right?
Yeah.
And but at the same time, like what they don't tell you is that like all of this music that is pop music is black music.
Yeah.
All of it is music that comes from black American culture, right? At the very least, there's a thread that goes through all of it. And,
And then when you start learning like learning those things, and even with me, I was learning that stuff really like very early because the first music artist I ever loved was Jimi Hendrix. I was like 6 or 7 years old, and I was like finding documentaries that were playing on like A&E or something like that, and reading magazines. So I was getting a touch into this person, and you're starting to be like, why do people hate black people so much?
yeah, I mean, of course, man. And like, um, and yeah, as someone who, it's like, it's always, it really is a challenging topic to talk about, but as someone who I've taken like I've like dedicated like so much of my life to jazz music. Like I have
Yeah.
3 degrees in jazz music, like 10 years of college studying Black American music, right? Um, and and yet at the same time, I don't want to pretend that that automatically makes me like woke about it.
Or
Right?
or down or whatever. Yeah, like there's a lot of people that find themselves in a hip hop scene or whatever, a black scene, who
Right.
or are kind of voyeuristic about it.
Yeah, or just completely ignorant,
Yeah.
or say like, oh, it's just notes. It's just notes with jazz. Like you would hear
No.
that from people say it's just notes, and it's like, well, it's music has never been just notes,
No,
right? Never.
there's always something connected to it, there's always something.
It's culture. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's culture. And so like be navigating being like a like a like a white person who's celebrating music from a culture that's ultimately like not my doesn't originate from my culture is something that like I've um it's not an unfamiliar place for me, right?
Right.
In at this but at the same time, when we look at the history of jazz music, it's when we look at the history of like the music out of Black America, it really is a miracle, right? Because these are like it stems from like arguably or not arguably like the least free people in America, right?
Yeah.
Right. And it's music that's like so incredible and joyous and expressive and virtuosic and like everything that you want from music, right? Um, and and for all intents and purposes, the creators of this music could have been like, get the hell out of here. This is not your music. Don't record me. This is, and the interesting thing about like jazz music in particular is that jazz music originates during a time in America, during a time in the world when recording technology originates, right? So like it's this music that is like from the people, like street level, like ground level, not academic,
Right.
at least in it, like at least like in the sense of that, like it's not coming from an academy. It's not coming from an academy. It comes from the folk. It's folk music, right? It comes
Yeah,
from
you're hearing it in its more, purest, rawest
right. It
form,
doesn't mean that there's not like academic merit to the music. That's not a slight in any way, but so it's folk music, right? And historically, before the early 1900s, like folk music is a kind of music that the only way it was spread around the world was by notation.
Yeah.
So you needed a third party to show up, write it out, put their own spin on it, and then spread it around the world. And so the biases are already in from step one. And the difference with jazz music is that it's a folk music that recording technology allowed the primary sources of this music to be spread worldwide, and it became a phenomenon. Like Louis Armstrong was the biggest artist in the world in like the 1920s, right? And so what the result of that is that jazz music or Black American music became like, instead of being a closed door of exclusivity, it became an open door.
Right.
And it became like almost like open source code. Like when you like not Microsoft Word, but like whatever that other one is called that we have all used at one point. That's like an open source version of Microsoft Word, where anyone can kind of get in there and say like, all right, I can make this. I can put my own spin on it. I can make it. So it became an umbrella. It became an open door. It became this ever-growing umbrella that, and this is the miracle of it, right? Is that it became an open umbrella that like allowed itself. I know I'm personifying this genre of music, but it allowed itself to be transformed by other cultures.
Yeah.
Knowing with the total confidence that core, at the essence of it, will never be extinguished by other cultures' influence on it, right? So like you see that every jazz artist in a sense is like a filter, right? That they put their personal spin through all this other music, comes through them, and it becomes a personal filter. But ultimately, there's still that ember of like, this is Black American culture. This is music that comes from Black America. And so like the whole point of these last like 15 minutes of my talking is that this music has a really, really long and like, I would say largely positive history with like being multicultural.
Yeah.
Around this center of like the core of it, right? Which comes from Black America, and then the multicultural aspect is around that. And so,
and you were even talking about like in the book about how, someone Charlie Parker, he liked classical music, and he could take something and put his own little notes, little things into it, like on the fly or whatever. You even joked about like, while you're reading it, I might have lost you there a little bit during this explanation. But this is, it's a thing where, there's all this music before him, but he was able to like take it, and like you said, dig into it like open source material and stuff like that, make it his own. And the cool thing about it was if like you said, this was when recording technology was happening. Before that, there might have been a lot of bias about that performance by somebody just writing it down. They might have like, kind of like, when you're transcribing somebody, and you take the stupid stuff out of there, the ums, the everything. But sometimes the ums and everything might actually bring a lot of character to that person. Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of the, yeah, I mean, and no matter what, this topic is really, no, I mean, no matter what the reception is to this, I'm still like, I'm still committed to supporting this, and to supporting like Black American culture and Black America, and like I've only sold like one piece of art from this book, and the proceeds for that went to Black Lives Matter organization, and I'm committed to selling more of it and donating the money and all that stuff. So like I'm definitely not in the interest of man, I don't know, you might want to edit some of this stuff out because I don't want to come across as like I'm really wary about like coming across as like defensive in this situation.
No, you sound fine. Okay, let's move on a little bit. Let's talk about this the forward from Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Mhm.
Like, I feel like he just kind of wraps this whole thing up so well in a way where he talks about the mythology of the story of Charlie Parker, the whole thing about I heard like the rumors and everything, but tying it into like what's going on today with you know the Black Lives Matter movement, dealing with in a pandemic, how that affects Black America, Black people in this world. Kind of talk about the story about with this forward from Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Well, honestly, from my point of view, there's not a whole lot of story there behind it because basically, like all of a sudden, I get an email from the the dudes at Z2, and they're like, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is writing the forward, and I'm like, you kidding me? That's like the most amazing thing I've ever heard. This like he's like the exact perfect person to write the forward for this book because not only is he like the Kareem we all know, like Skyhook, like all that stuff. Like, sure, that's cool, but if that's all he was, he probably wouldn't be the right person to write this, right? But he's this incredible like cultural icon, um, and he's a freaking scholar on like jazz music. His dad was like a bebop, trumpet player, and on top of that, like he's a scholar for jazz music in L.A., where the book takes place, which is so cool. He just had an article that was in the L.A. Times about the L.A. jazz scene back then, like in the area just after I'm depicting in the book, I think. And so like the perfect person to write this, and obviously like it's a humongous honor. And I remember like Pete, the guy who did the colors for some of the book, he texted me and he was like, dude, Kareem typed our names. Because like he mentions both of us by name in the forward, and I was like, I didn't even really think of it that way. But
Yeah, he didn't just like write a thing that was just like kind of blanketed about Charlie Parker or anything. He actually like put the whole work in consideration when writing the forward.
yeah, and he kind of like took into consideration the kind of conceit of the book, the point of view of the book, points of view in the book, and yeah, I mean, it's just a tremendous, like, incredible honor. Probably, it's all downhill from here, I guess, right?
It's all that. No, there's one thing about that forward that really like rang true with me, and it was the last paragraph of it. And I want to read a little bit of it. It was like the danger with any legend is for the public to defy them, because that brushes aside their humanity, the very real suffering they endured that shaped and fueled their talent. Instead, we pay him tribute for being one of us and finding a way to express, what it feels to be us. And that tribute is to say, I hear and I mean it. Reason why, that kind of rings true with me is sometimes when people, when you're dealing with somebody's legacy after they pass, there's sort of like there's like the sainthood that kind of gets added, or a whitewashing. Like me personally, my example of that is you're familiar of the hip hop producer Jay Dilla, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Once he passed away, there was a weird whitewashing of his sort of persona, his image, his look. It went into this weird, like, sort of hippy dippy sort of thing. When he was but when he in reality he was like like a real Detroit street dude. Like he was like, but had this amazing musical ability and everything.
Right.
And there were so many things about his life that people just didn't talk about, or they put this weird whitewashing that you're not seeing the crust of this person, and that's what I liked about that's what I like about this graphic novel of yours. You're hearing these stories where you're seeing the best and the worst of these people.
Yeah, right. So the other thing that happens is the opposite, where like a character, a figure like Charlie Parker, he doesn't. It's like on one hand, like a certain subset of America or of the world, like took every one of his behaviors and was like, this is the path to greatness.
Yeah.
All these saxophone players and jazz musicians, like started taking, you know, opiates and serious drugs and stuff like that, and like, and but on the flip side of that is everybody else who's not in that subset of people. It's not that they get like they become defined as like just a drug, like a druggie.
Right.
Like this guy's just an addict, just a druggie. And really, like, we treat addicts like so poorly in America, right? Our relationship with addiction is so messed up in this country.
So
right?
messed up.
And like and so again, like going back to earlier in our conversation, saying like, what's the topic that I need to talk about in this book? Like, I have to talk about this. And you know, one of the requests that I got, like right away, first thing from the estate was like, don't show him taking drugs. And that's fine. I wasn't planning on it. But
right.
like at the same time, like it kind of made me think like I need to really find nuanced ways to speak to this person's, like, I can't just ignore it. I can't. That would be
right. Instead of showing them taking drugs, maybe you can show like why, like,
right.
No,
well, yeah, or like show the effect of it, like
the effect or the, you know, the reason that would lead him to doing that.
Like the conceit in chapter 1 of the monster, right?
Yeah.
Or kind of like you know, speaking to like a little bit, maybe hopefully what's a more nuanced take on addiction that I brought to the table. So yeah, man, it's an interesting thing when you're dealing with a legacy of a figure like this, and trying to like, and again, this is the another one of the many reasons why I chose to tell it with this like rotating points of view, from several points of view, because it allows for an exploration of all these different sides of all of these different issues, and in a way that like none of them will be totally accurate and none of them will be totally true, but hopefully when you pull back and like squint and see all of them together, that like the big picture comes into focus somewhat, you know. And yeah, I mean, it's fascinating for sure.
You know, that's talk about the look of the book. You know, there's the artwork in it, you know, it's very vibrant. It definitely you know, leads to the story, kind of is a great companion with the story. Kind of talk about what you wanted to fulfill with the actual visuals.
Yeah, so this was, again, like from day one, this was my plan, was to have each chapter narrated by a different person, and then have the style of every aspect of the book change from chapter to chapter. And the idea of that was that every aspect, from the font choice to the storytelling style, like how the panels interact with each other, to the narration style, to the colors that are used and the textures that are used, the inking finish that's used, was meant to reflect the unique point of view of the narrator. So, for example, just to go through like aspects of each one, like the Dizzy Gillespie one is extremely, I would say, like, it's really dynamic, right? The panel layouts have some like real dynamism to it. There's a heavy use of like large areas of black ink in that chapter, and this is to me like a trademark of like dynamic comic art. Have like confidence to put big areas of black ink on the page.
And
right?
you got like colors and stuff to represent the music, you know, and that was like really cool.
Yeah, for sure. And like, and that was the other challenge in this book that has come up a few times, is that this challenge of depicting sound in a silent and still medium. And so this allowed me to kind of take a stab at several different ways to do that, right? And then the second chapter is from the point of view of a European artist, who's a bit of like a highfalutin, like windbag kind of guy, right? In a very fun way,
Right.
I suppose. Although, so for that chapter, I was trying to channel as many European comic artists, like tributes as possible, and to have like the colors get more vibrant as the story gets more absurd, right? So this was the angle in that chapter. The third chapter is narrated by a college age photographer who went on to become quite famous, named William Claxton. And this one, I feel like he was maybe 20 years old when this interaction happened, and a 20-year-old's perspective is limited. And so like for this one, it's sort of like me riffing on a real rigid square formula. So like almost like my version of like Archie comics or something like that, where
Right.
It's a total grid. Every page is the same layout. And the colors are kind of retro looking and a little bit like very simple to kind of show this guy's like sort of naive point of view at the time in his life. The following chapter is a woman who was a bohemian, kind of like pre-counterculture. Before counterculture was even a word, she was counterculture. And she's someone who's like, from all my research, was like really, her agenda was like breaking down boundaries in the world, like boundaries of gender identity and you know, questioning the importance of marriage and monogamy and all of these boundaries. And so her chapter, there are no panel borders in that chapter. And if there's everything that looks like a panel border, the only reason it's there is because it's an element from another panel that becomes a panel border for another thing. So, and that whole chapter is you know, so it's this real poetic kind of approach for that chapter. The next one is narrated by John Coltrane, and for me, like the Coltrane chapter was the hardest one for me to really settle on a style. Because I drew that first. That first page of that Coltrane chapter is the only one that I redrew, and I drew that thing like 4 times, and I could never get it right until I finally did. And for that one, like I think about Coltrane, and I see someone who, when he sees the world, like I just imagine that he's someone who looks everywhere and sees patterns everywhere, and sees like, and sees everything with such detail, you know, that his music is so detailed and so pattern oriented that I was like, I'm gonna model this on like Sergio Topi, the Italian comic artist. I think he's Italian, right? Topi.
I think so.
And because Topi's work, even like there's so much like so many beautiful little intricate patterns that like are just only he can see that stuff, you know. And there's a sequence in the Coltrane chapter where he like disappears into this like mystical musical space in his head, and the colors in the Coltrane chapter are super wacky, right? Like like Charlie Parker is like this super hot pink color, and like Coltrane's purple, and everything is like yellow and orange and these like super like not realistic colors. But then when he disappears into this musical space, the colors are like actually just regular colors. And so to him, like music is more real, almost like the real reality, and the real world is like this false reality kind of thing. The next chapter is narrated by Ross Russell, who wrote a biography on Charlie Parker and was his manager. And Ross Russell was, prior to being in music, took a stab at writing like crime novels, like pulp novels. And so obviously, like, it's a huge tribute to like Darwin Cook, like Parker like comic books, graphic novels.
Yeah.
Because that's, to me, is like the kind of like ultimate film noir style, like comic book graphic novels and stuff like that. And it's a really fun style to work in. It was really fun. And then that's all bookended by the intro and outro chapters. And for those ones, it's more like my house style, I guess, Dave style, right? Yeah, whatever the hell that is, even. You know?
Right.
But yeah, man, and I would say that like there's a learning process. You know, there's a lot of like I guess like trial and error in putting this together. But it was such a blast. So much fun.
All in all, you know, what do you hope people get out of reading this graphic novel?
I hope people go check out Charlie Parker's music. And so it depends on the audience, right? So let's like go through the different audiences. Some people who buy it will be comic book people, and I hope those people check out Charlie Parker's music and really try to hear it from a historical perspective, because it's really hard to listen to old music with modern ears, right? Yeah. Because Charlie Parker's language that he innovated is so ubiquitous now with jazz music that you'll be like, yeah, this sounds like to the uneducated ears, like this sounds like the guy that played at my sister's wedding. You know what I mean? And it's like, whoa, no. You got to try to hear it from the point of view of people back then, because this is like space age, light years ahead stuff compared to what was going on back then. Yeah. So first thing, comic people, listen to Charlie Parker. Charlie Parker people, read some comics. That's the goal for those people, right? So like, I hope all the people who find this book because they love Charlie Parker are like blown away with what comics can accomplish, right? Because comics is like the greatest storytelling medium out there, in my opinion. I just think like that you can do anything in this medium, and especially when the medium itself becomes part of the message, it's just like it's the most amazing thing. And then for all of everyone else, somewhere in between those two things. So like really, like I want people to check out the music. I want people to check out comics. And in terms of like on a deeper level, for people who are like a little more casual about their relationship to Charlie Parker or comics, but kind of dabble or whatever, I hope that people read this and reconsider their relationship with their heroes and idols, and in every situation to say like, oh, that's a real human being, you know, that's a real person. It's kind of crazy to think about, you know, like that Beyonce wakes up and, you know, has a regular day just like the rest of us, you know, that she's a real human being, because we really suck the humanity out of people when we put them on a pedestal like that. Right. And it's a distinctly, I guess, like shooting from the hip, you know, I'm sure that you could argue against this and win, but like, if you were to like, it feels like very much a 20th and 21st century thing, where we ruin people by putting them on a pedestal. In a sense, we like make it so that they can't live with themselves, or they start to believe the BS about themselves. You know what I mean? Right. And maybe you could even argue that Charlie Parker is one of the first people to kind of fall victim to this. I don't know if that's true. That's a bit of a stretch maybe, but it's definitely a conversation that's worth having. Right.
Besides Chasing the Bird, what are some other things that you're working on, or things that you've worked on in the past that, you know, you might want to talk about?
Yeah. Well, like I mentioned earlier, I did a book called Instrumental with Z2 Comics that is really cool, and it has a soundtrack of music that goes with it. It's like a story about this trumpet player that comes across this old trumpet that makes the most transcendent music, but every time he plays it, somebody dies. And and the music is really cool on it, like headphone kind of cinematic headphone candy kind of music. And then I I had a 4-issue sci-fi series come out through Scout Comics earlier this year. It just actually wrapped up in July, and it's called Canopus, Canopus, and that's a story about a woman who wakes up on an alien planet. She has no memory of how she got there, just vague memory of her own identity, and her memories start to return as she explores the planet, and her memories come back as monsters on the surface of the planet and obstacles in her way and stuff like that. And so it's really an exploration of like the relationship between memory and identity, and then the relationship between like resentment and fulfillment and stuff like that. So kind of like me working through my own personal issues through comics, through making comics. And then also like I've done a lot of music too, but we don't need to. We're talking about comics right now, really.
No, we can talk about music too, man. Like, yo, I'm a music person, so what you been working on in regards to music, man.
Well, lately I would say in the past few years, my focus has really shifted largely to making comics. The last big music project I did was like an indie rock project called Talking Underwater. We did a full length album that I think is really good. It's all like sad. It's all super depressing music.
All right, yeah, my favorite kind.
Yeah. And then,
sad, depressing music has gotten me through this pandemic.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I'm like, oh, there's somebody out there that gets me.
And then I have a record that I did before the instrumental soundtrack called Calligraphy. It's a similar concept, kind of post rock influences with like jazz. This kind of combination of like Sigur Rós with like 1970s Miles Davis, or like late 60s 1970s Miles Davis with, and then I before that I did a record called Radioactive that's like a jazz big band music, but like modern jazz big band music. So it's kind of like when you say big band, people think of like Glenn Miller and swing music.
Yeah,
that stuff is great, but that's not what this is. This is a little bit more like, again, like cinematic and stuff like that. So it's definitely worth checking out. You might dig it. It's good. All the instrumental music is good, like music for like accompanying making art and stuff like that. And lately, and then I just teach a lot. I teach a lot of music, so and also some comic stuff too now. So it's pretty crazy. I'm very lucky that I've gotten the opportunity to explore my obsessions to the degree that people will pay me money to do what I want to do.
How does each thing sort of lend its hand to other? How does the music side lend its hand to your comic creating, and how does the comic creating sort of lend itself to like the music creating?
Well, I think the big lesson that music is this amazing thing, and I think music is this incredible thing for people in that no matter where your like mental orientation is with regards to knowledge, whether you're a knower or a feeler,
Yeah.
or intuitive or a real number crunchy kind of person, music will challenge you. So like music is the ultimate equalizer. It will challenge you and it will make you work. It has this incredible magic at pointing out your flaws and your strengths, right? Music does. And so like, to me, music taught me how I learn and allowed me to kind of like work with that and sort of like become a very effective like student myself forever. So like in the sense that like I learn new things quickly.
Yeah.
Right? Thanks to music, totally. And also music will teach you the value of incremental progress on a problem to solve a problem. Comics is like that too. You know what I mean? Like you set up your like calendar and you say like, if I can do 2 pages a week for a year. That's like that's 100 and some page graphic novel. Now you've got something that's really profound in 2 pages a week for a year. And I think in our kind of immediate culture, we really struggle with commitment.
Right. Like what you said right now, like, 2 pages a week for a year. I'm like, oh my God, even with me, that's like a big thing. It sounds like, okay, what if one week I don't do something?
Then you just you just pick it up. I mean, it's fine. So ultimately, like, look, I've been really lucky. That's the real takeaway for me, is that, like, I live a charmed life. I've lived a life where I've had parents who were supportive, and you know, and they always encouraged me to go into arts. My dad's an electrician, and so, like, he was like, I just don't want you to be an electrician. Right?
Like, I don't want you to be on your knees, for your whole life,
He's like, he's retired and his body is like beat up because of this work, and he's like, you're not going to do that, man. And so they always push the arts in me, and from a young age I showed a real proclivity towards drawing, and I showed a lot, like, some talent towards music as well, and I always just kind of like never wanted to be like a tourist in any of this stuff, so I would just live there for as long as I could until I got good enough at it, and
right.
So the way they work together is that way. Like, at this point, I don't know. It's just, I'm just really lucky.
Like, when it comes down to, like, what are some of your favorite, like, music artists or albums or whatever, whether it's all time or the stuff that you're listening to right now?
Well, I think my favorite music of all time is probably the 3.5 albums that Miles Davis and Gil Evans did together. So Sketches of Spain, Miles Ahead, Porgy and Bess, and Quiet Nights. The part of Quiet Nights that's good. That album is kind of a little bit of a in a way, but and then typical, and then the rest is basically pretty typical, somewhere between, like, typical jazz stuff and then typical, like, depressed white guy music. So, like, I love, like, Elliott Smith, XO. I love OK Computer by Radiohead. I love, like, the White Album and Abbey Road and Revolver by the Beatles. I love, like, all of Fiona Apple's music super deeply. Like, she's, like, my greatest, like, living songwriter.
Yeah.
And like, Mingus is, like, a huge love of mine. Like, so, like, Let My Children Hear Music, and there's some really crazy, like, live Mingus, like live at Antibes, or right now live at the Jazz Workshop, and it's just like some pretty cool, pretty amazing stuff. I also really love the music that Miles Davis was making in the late 60s and early 70s. So that music is really close to my heart. I was that weirdo who found my way into jazz through that music. So, like, really, the first jazz music that I really loved was, like, Live Evil and Bitches Brew by Miles Davis, which is, like, so weird. Like, especially Live Evil is, like, such an avant-garde record, and I didn't realize it at the time. I would bring it to art class at high school and be like, put this on, and all the other students would be like, Dave, what the hell is this music? And I'm like, this is the shit. This is the best music. So yeah, I mean, and as far as what I'm listening to right now, there's a new record that came out by Maria Schneider. I don't know if you know her music. No. It's amazing. And her music, you can't find it anywhere because she's one of the most vocal people against streaming music. Her music is not on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, or anywhere. You have to go to her Artist Share website and buy it directly from her. But I shit you not, it's the best music you'll ever hear. It's, like, the most incredible stuff of all time. Maria Schneider, it's like jazz big band stuff, but again, not like swing era big band, but like new music. And then what else? I downloaded something that I checked out. the new Bright Eyes album I came out yesterday. I haven't listened to it yet. There's a new Jacob Collier album that came out that I haven't listened to yet, but I have on here. I have the new Taylor Swift album on my phone.
Yo, that new Taylor Swift is good.
It's good. I like Taylor Swift's music. I think her songwriting, in particular, her lyrics are like so great. She tells a story like nobody else, you know.
Yeah, this new album, like I can't even front that it is good, you know. And there's stuff I've liked in the past too, but like this new album, I'm like, yo,
Yeah, beautiful textures. There's a new album by this trumpet player named Ambrose Akinmusire. He's on Blue Note Records, I think, and it's great. It looks like this.
Okay, yeah, I think I've come across him.
His music is very challenging, and then just that's I'm not great at keeping up with new music really. Did
you check out that Mingus project, the live album from Detroit that came out late last year?
No. What's it called?
I think it's just called Mingus Live in Detroit.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Yeah, DJ Amir. He has the whole Strata Records catalog, and even stuff that's never been released. So he's been re-releasing a lot of the stuff.
Yeah, I actually got that album for my dad for Christmas.
Okay, nice.
So yeah, but I got it for my dad, and I didn't listen to it.
Yeah, it's dope. It's dope. Yo, man, it's been good talking with you. I love having talks about music. With people like you. It's great to hear your insight about just jazz and music and how you put it into this graphic novel. Charlie Parker graphic novel. Chasing the why am I already forgetting his name?
Chasing the Bird.
Chasing the Bird, man. Charlie Parker in Chasing the Bird. Charlie Parker in Los Angeles. It's out now. Go ahead and, cop that. Where can people go online to get more information about what you're up to and, listen to your music, your other comic books and whatnot?
My website is davechisholmmusic.com. And then I'm on Twitter, like, way too much. And then my Twitter handle is Chisholm Dave. So my last name and my first name.
That's what's up.
I mean, I'm on Instagram, too, but I don't post that much. I just post pictures of my cats and stuff.
Thank you for listening to the Fresh is the Word podcast, hosted and produced by myself, Kelly K. Fresh Frazier, empowered by Anchor at anchor.fm/Fresh is the Word. Fresh is the Word theme music provided by Steve O. You can find more of his productions at iamsteveo.bandcamp.com, and that's EYEAMSTEVEO.bandcamp.com. Fresh is the Word is available on all major streaming platforms. Please rate and review on Apple Podcasts and Stitcher. If you want to support Fresh is the Word, please consider pledging via Patreon at patreon.com/freshistheword. Follow Fresh is the Word on social media on Twitter at Fresh is the Pod, on Instagram at Fresh is the Word Podcast, and join the Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Fresh is the Word. For more information about Fresh is the Word and our other podcasts, Breaking Records and Renaissance Soul, and a collection of pop culture articles and reviews, please visit freshesthepodcast.com. Thank you for listening and your support. Goodbye and good night.
Fresh is the word.